Imagine for a second buying a multi-million-dollar mega mansion. But, when the real estate agent hands you the keys, they casually mention that you're only allowed to walk in the front hallway and maybe use the guest bathroom.
Right, and the rest of the house is just sitting there. You can see the doors, but they're completely dead-bolted shut.
Exactly. And the only way to actually access the property you just paid for is to, I don't know, pick the locks yourself or pay some aftermarket guy to hand you a master key.
Yeah, which is exactly what's happening in the motorcycle industry right now.
It is, and that's what we're doing a deep dive into today. We're looking at this staggering gap between what modern motorcycles are capable of out of the box and what they can actually do when you strip away those factory restrictions.
It's a massive gap.
Yeah, so to do this, we're pulling apart a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got dyno charts, a massive European tire test, some aftermarket parts listings, and even a white paper on POV cinematography.
It's a great mix of sources.
It really is. We're looking at how software, thermodynamics, and even rubber chemistry are fundamentally changing the ride. And we're going to center all of this around a machine that just perfectly embodies this entire contradiction, the 2025 and 2026 Ducati Street Fighter V4S.
Oh, man. I mean, that bike is just an absolute masterclass in mechanical excess.
Seriously.
We're talking about a 25,000-pound naked motorcycle, and it produces an unbelievable 214 brake horsepower and 120 newton meters of torque.
On a naked bike.
Right, on a machine that deliberately lacks those large aerodynamic fairings you would normally use to hide from the wind. Plus, it features this massive 6.9-inch TFT dash that reads out telemetry you'd normally only expect on a prototype race car.
Yeah, the sources mention that. You get like G-force meters, real-time lean angles, and precise brake and throttle percentages literally right in front of your face.
It's basically a supercomputer on two wheels.
But, and this is where it gets funny, when you dig into the YouTube reviews of this bike, like the one we have from DSR, the daily friction of driving this thing becomes almost comical.
Oh, yeah. The quirks are pretty intense.
Yeah. Like, you are paying supercar money, but you're getting an 845 millimeter seat height, which is punishingly tall if you're a shorter rider. And you've got these massive top-tier Brembo brakes, 330 millimeter discs up front, 245 in the rear, but the bite is highly progressive.
Right, so they take a deliberate second to actually grab.
Exactly, which can totally catch you off guard if you aren't used to it. My
Yeah.
absolute favorite part, this is wild, it has a 16-liter fuel tank on a massive V4 engine that absolutely chugs gas, but there is no fuel gauge.
Yeah, that's just classic Ducati.
Right, you just get a tiny low fuel warning light right when you're about to be stranded on the side of the highway.
Well, I mean, the manufacturer assumes that if you're looking at your fuel economy, you bought the wrong machine.
Fair point.
It is designed entirely to be an intoxicating, Sunday fun bike.
Yeah.
The dashboard focuses on lean angle and G-force because that is the emotional metric this bike is selling.
Okay, but I want to push back on the sheer logic of this. Because if we look at the other extreme in our sources, CMC Bikes lists the 2026 Honda CV125R.
Ah, the 125, yeah.
Yeah, this is a 125cc 4-valve learner bike for $4,799. Yet for literally a fifth of the price of the Ducati, it still gives you high-end Showa SFFBP upside-down forks.
Right, the separate function fork, big piston.
Exactly, which essentially separates the spring and damping functions to give you incredibly precise suspension control. Plus, it gives you full LED lighting, ABS, and a 5-inch TFT screen. So, why would anyone drop 25,000 pounds on a 214 horsepower street bike when you physically can't use 80% of that power on a public road without going to prison?
Because it's not a logical purchase.
I mean, the Honda gives you a brilliant modern tech stack, and you can actually wring its neck without dying.
True, but you're applying logical commuting standards to a purely emotional purchase. The Ducati is about the mechanical grip, the aggressive chassis geometry, and just the sheer violence of an 1100cc V4 engine at full tilt.
Yeah, I guess you don't buy a V4 to commute to the office.
Exactly. But, your point about usability highlights the great irony in the sources. Out of the box, Euro 5 and U.S. emissions regulations effectively suffocate that 25,000 pounds experience.
So you aren't even getting what you paid for.
No, you aren't actually getting the feeling of 214 horsepower off the showroom floor. The bike is electronically gagged by the factory to pass legal noise and emissions tests.
Right, so you buy the mansion, but you're stuck in the hallway. Which means if you want the whole house, you have to hack the software.
Precisely.
Let's look at the BT Moto Stage 1 Plus handheld tuner. It's $939, and the dyno charts they provide for this thing are just wild. Flashing the ECU with this tuner adds a full 30 wheel horsepower at redline.
It's a massive jump.
But what is the factory actually doing to hide 30 horsepower from the rider in the first place?
Well, it really comes down to electronic throttle plates and drive-by noise regulations. To pass the stringent sound test required by law, the factory ECU is programmed to literally close the engine's throttle plates at high RPMs.
Wait, really? Even if you're pulling the throttle?
Yeah, regardless of what your wrist is doing on the handlebar. You could have the throttle physically pinned wide open, but the computer just overrides you. It cuts off the engine's air supply to keep the exhaust note quiet.
That is wild.
Yeah, so the BT Moto software simply deletes that command. It forces the throttle plates to stay open 100%, letting the engine breathe. So on standard 91 octane gas, the stock bike hits a peak of 184 horsepower at the wheel.
Okay.
But tuned, it bumps that peak up to 197.
Wow. And the source mentions it also completely removes the per gear limiters, right? So first gear has the exact same unrestricted power delivery as sixth gear.
Exactly, which is huge for acceleration.
Yeah, and that translates to real-world speed. The 60 to 130 mile per hour time drops from 5.0 down to 4.8 seconds. But the source emphasizes that this isn't just about going faster in a straight line. It's actually about low-speed drivability, specifically fixing that aggressive deceleration fuel cutoff.
Right, and this is where emissions laws actually make the motorcycle worse to ride.
How so?
Well, when you roll off the throttle on a stock modern superbike, the computer instantly shuts off the fuel injectors completely, like zero fuel.
To save gas.
More to prevent unburnt hydrocarbons from entering the exhaust and ruining the emissions test. But this causes a massive jerky engine braking effect. It makes low-speed cornering and, navigating traffic feel incredibly harsh.
Oh, I hate that feeling on a bike.
Yeah, it's terrible. So by rewriting the internal fueling map, the tuner keeps a tiny bit of fuel flowing on deceleration. That smooths out the transition so the bike doesn't just violently lurch forward.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And the tune also addresses a major physical issue, which is heat. It drops the engine fan activation temperatures from 220 degrees Fahrenheit down to 90. But how does changing a few lines of code keep an engine block physically cooler?
It's actually a really fascinating quirk of thermodynamics related to the air-fuel ratio.
Okay.
So to pass emissions tests during idle and cruising speeds, the factory uses oxygen sensors to force the engine into what's called a closed-loop mode. This makes it run incredibly lean.
Lean, meaning lots of air, very little fuel.
Exactly. And a lean burn is an incredibly hot burn. So by rewriting the map to richen the mixture, basically adding slightly more fuel than strictly necessary, you create an evaporative cooling effect inside the combustion chamber.
Wait, so throwing more gas at it makes it colder?
Basically, yeah. The extra fuel absorbs the ambient heat before it ignites, meaning the engine block literally runs cooler.
Okay, so software gets this part of the way there.
Yeah.
But if you really want to fix the thermodynamics and unleash the sound, you have to physically rip out the hardware.
Oh, yeah. The hardware is a huge bottleneck.
Right. And DBK Direct lists the Termignoni under-seat slip-on exhaust for this bike at $6,450. And that is the discounted price. I mean, why is a metal pipe practically the price of that entire Honda 125 we just talked about?
It's because of what it replaces and the materials used to do it. See, a factory exhaust system on a bike like this is packed with catalytic converters.
Right.
These are massive, heavy ceramic honeycombs coated in precious metals. Their whole job is to superheat unburnt exhaust gases to neutralize them.
So they get incredibly hot.
Extremely. Having those sit directly underneath the engine and the rider's seat is, well, it's like trying to run a marathon while breathing through a thick wool blanket that happens to be on fire. It traps a monumental amount of thermal mass right under your body.
Which explains why the DSR review specifically called out how badly your legs get roasted just sitting in traffic.
Exactly. The Termignoni system solves this by replacing the stainless steel mid-headers and just completely deleting those catalytic converters.
It's gone.
Yep. It replaces them with straight high-grade titanium sleeves and hand-finished carbon fiber end caps. So you are removing that massive thermal sink, shedding a huge amount of dead weight, and letting the exhaust pulses escape without any obstruction.
Which gives you that crazy sound.
The sound, yes, but it also dramatically improves exhaust scavenging. That's the process where the vacuum created by one exiting exhaust pulse actually helps suck the fresh air and fuel into the cylinder for the next cycle.
Wow, okay. But the listing is heavily stamped race use only. I imagine deleting the catalytic converters means you're technically breaking the law on a public road. And DBK notes that this exhaust strictly requires the included UpMap T800 Plus device. I assume this goes back to that air-fuel mixture you were just talking about.
Without a doubt.
Like, if you suddenly let the engine exhale that freely, the factory software isn't going to know what to do.
Right. If you just bolt a straight titanium pipe onto a modern engine without changing the ECU, the engine will draw in vastly more air due to that improved scavenging effect we mentioned. But it will inject the exact same factory amount of fuel.
Oh, so it'll run lean again.
Extremely lean, dangerously lean. The combustion temperatures will skyrocket past safe limits, and you run a very real risk of melting a piston or just burning up your exhaust valves.
That sounds like an expensive mistake.
Very. That's why the UpMap T800 Plus is required. It's a physical device that plugs into the bike's diagnostic port to flash a custom fuel map. It's specifically calibrated to feed enough fuel to match that massive increase in airflow.
So we've bypassed the noise regulations, we've bypassed the emissions restrictions, we've got 200 plus horsepower breathing fire through a titanium pipe, and the engine is running cool.
The dream setup.
Right. But all of that mechanical aggression creates a completely new bottleneck. You have to actually connect that immense power to the asphalt.
Yes, the rubber.
Let's look at the 2025 PS Magazine tire test. They took a 200 horsepower BMW S1000RR out to a testing facility in France. The ambient temperatures were between 14 and 18 degrees Celsius, so a totally standard, moderate riding day.
Very typical street conditions.
Exactly. They tested 6 standard sport tires against 6 track-focused hypersport tires. And the results are completely counterintuitive to what most riders think.
They really are. The prevailing dogma in the motorcycle community is always that a track-focused hypersport tire, with its stiff carcass and slick rubber shoulders, is going to offer the absolute maximum grip.
Because it's for racing.
Right. But a standard sport tire, specifically the brand new Dunlop SportSmart MK4, won the overall test. It beat out every single dedicated hypersport tire on the roster.
Hold on, let me just pause here. If I spend 25,000 pounds on a V4 Superbike and then drop another $6,500 to turn it into an unrestricted track weapon, why wouldn't I put the absolute most aggressive track rubber on the wheels? You're telling me commuter-friendly sport tires are faster?
On the street, absolutely. It all comes down to the chemical composition of the rubber and the physics of viscoelasticity.
Viscoelasticity. Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. So tires grip by mechanically deforming into the microscopic peaks and valleys of the asphalt. Hypersport tires, like the Pirelli Supercorsa SPV4, which, by the way, did win the dry handling test with a 79.8-second lap, rely heavily on carbon black in their compound.
Carbon black.
Yeah, it's incredible for ultimate grip, but it requires massive, sustained mechanical heat to become pliable. You have to brake violently and corner at extreme lean angles over and over again to build the internal temperature of the tire up to 80 degrees Celsius or more.
That's practically boiling.
Exactly. And at 14 degrees Celsius on a public road, you simply cannot generate enough friction to keep them hot. The tire remains essentially like hard plastic.
So you're riding a 200 horsepower motorcycle on a hockey puck.
Basically, yeah. Sport tires, on the other hand, use a compound heavily enriched with silica.
Okay, and what does silica do?
Silica chemically binds to the water and the road surface. It remains incredibly pliable and generates mechanical grip at much lower temperatures. It doesn't need to be tortured to wake up, It offers near maximum grip almost instantly, right out of your driveway.
And that completely explains the wet handling test results. The silica-rich Dunlop MK4 ran a 72.6-second lap in the wet. The worst performing hypersport tire in those exact same conditions, the Continental Race Attack 2 Street, ran an 84.3-second lap.
It's a massive gap.
That's nearly a 12-second difference on a single lap. On a racetrack, a 12-second gap is an absolute eternity. You could practically stop and make a sandwich.
You really could. And the data tells a very clear, unavoidable story here. Modern sport tires have advanced to a point where they offer grip reserves that are practically impossible to safely exceed on public roads.
Right.
Unless your bike lives on a trailer and only sees the asphalt at a dedicated track day in the middle of summer, a hypersport tire is actively compromising your safety. You'll just have more grip, more predictability, and far better performance on your favorite canyon road with a silica-based sport tire.
It totally flips the script. Like, throwing the most expensive, aggressive racing components at a street bike doesn't optimize it. It actually breaks its usability for the environment it's actually in.
100%.
Which leads us to the final piece of this puzzle. The bike is unrestricted, the fueling is mapped perfectly, the exhaust is flowing, and the silica is gripping the pavement. But the organic mass sitting on top of the bike has to actually survive the physics of 130 miles per hour.
Yeah, the rider.
Let's talk rider optimization, starting with how you carry your gear. We've got a source from Ride Adventures looking at motorcycle backpacks. And the overarching theme here is that aerodynamics matter immensely. You can't just toss a standard school backpack over your shoulder.
Definitely not. At highway speeds, aerodynamic drag isn't linear. It increases with the square of your velocity.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So going from 65 miles per hour to 130 miles per hour doesn't double the wind resistance against your body. It quadruples it. A traditional backpack basically acts as a parachute.
That sounds dangerous.
It is. The wind catches it, pulls the weight backward, and the shoulder straps dig violently into your armpits. That aerodynamic drag translates directly into steering inputs because your arms are fighting to hold on to the handlebars just to keep you on the bike.
So to isolate that movement, you need a sternum harness, like the quad lock or the NDM system.
Yeah.
Instead of the weight hanging off your shoulders, a sternum harness buckles directly in the center of your chest, right? It distributes the load tightly against your torso, so your arms are completely free to maneuver the bike.
It makes a world of difference.
The sources point to the Klim Knack Pack, which is a roughly $100 13-liter bag with a 3-liter Hydropack bladder, as a great minimalist option for dual sport riding. But for serious carrying capacity on the street, they highlight the RSD by Kriega Rove and Merle 34.
That's a beast of a bag.
It is. It's a massive 34-liter bag made of waxed 1000 denier cordura that can expand to hold an entire full-phase helmet. But I'm curious, why the specific focus on 1000 denier cordura? What makes that so special?
Well, denier is a measure of the fabric's linear mass density. In the context of motorcycle gear, a higher denier means thicker, vastly more durable fibers, and that translates to extreme slide and abrasion resistance.
This is about crashing.
Unfortunately, yes. If you come off the bike at speed, a standard nylon commuter bag will instantly disintegrate upon hitting the asphalt. It'll scatter your laptop and your gear all across the highway. 1000 denier cordura, though, is engineered to survive the slide. It protects the rider's spine from friction burns and keeps their cargo completely intact.
Okay, so the rider's strapped in safely, the aerodynamics are sorted, and you're hitting the canyons. Naturally, you want to film the ride.
Of course.
Our final source is a dense white paper on point-of-view motorcycle cinematography. And I have to say, I have watched so many action camera videos where a rider is clearly pushing the limits of the bike, the engine is screaming, but visually, it looks like they're commuting to the grocery store at 15 miles an hour.
Yeah, that visual disconnect is super common, and it's caused directly by the camera's default software processing. In easy or auto mode, an action camera tries to optimize for every variable at once to create a perfectly crisp image. When you're riding on a bright sunny day, the camera automatically ramps up the shutter speed to limit the amount of light hitting the sensor.
Okay.
But a fast shutter speed freezes every single frame of the video perfectly in place.
But human eyes don't freeze frames. When I'm moving fast, the trees and the road lines blur in my peripheral vision.
Precisely. Motion blur is the fundamental biological mechanism our brains use to perceive speed. By freezing the frames with a high shutter speed, the camera's auto mode completely strips away that sensation.
So it just looks slow and boring.
Exactly. The white paper stresses that to accurately convey the feeling of riding a motorcycle, you must switch the camera to pro mode and manually take control of the digital lens physics. You use what filmmakers call the 180-degree shutter rule.
Which means you have to force the camera to drag the shutter.
Yes. So, if you're shooting at 30 frames per second, you manually lock your shutter speed at 160th of a second. But because this lets in way too much light on a sunny day, you pair it with a physical neutral density filter over the lens.
Basically a pair of dark sunglasses for the camera.
Exactly. So the image doesn't blow out. By forcing that slower shutter, you introduce deliberate natural motion blur on the edges of the frame. The road surface and the passing scenery streak by in a massive blur, while the center of the frame, the handlebars and the vanishing point ahead, remains perfectly crisp.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
And it all circles back perfectly to the very first point we made today.
It really does.
Whether it's the BT Moto ECU flash bypassing the factory emissions limits, or switching to pro mode to bypass the camera's lazy auto exposure algorithms, the true enthusiast has to rip away those digital gatekeepers.
You have to.
The hardware is incredibly capable across the board. The digital sensor in that camera and the titanium valves in that V4 engine are absolute engineering marvels. But the factory defaults are always designed to play it safe.
Yeah, they are programmed for the lowest common denominator, right? They prioritize legal compliance and ease of use over raw performance. To get the actual experience you paid for, you have to take manual control of the systems.
It's been an incredible journey through the tech stack today. We started by looking at how a 4,700-pound Honda CB125R offers brilliant, sensible engineering with high-end, big piston forks right off the showroom floor.
Such a great little bike.
And then we contrasted that with a 25,000 pounds, 214 horsepower Ducati that requires a master class in hacking third-party ECU flashes, titanium pipes to solve thermodynamic nightmares, and advanced silica tire chemistry, just to be harnessed effectively on a public road.
It's a lot of work, but mapping out these advancements leaves us with a rather, well, provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we've seen today that silica sport tires are outperforming track rubber in real-world conditions, and digital tunes are finding 30 hidden horsepower trapped just behind a few lines of computer code. It really begs the question, are we approaching an era where the hardware of motorcycles has officially peaked?
Wait, what do you mean?
Think about the trajectory of this technology. In 10 years, will buying a new motorcycle just mean buying a standardized, generic rolling chassis?
Oh, wow.
Will the mechanical components, the Asian block, the suspension internals, the brake calipers, all just be identical across the entire lineup? And then you're required to pay a monthly software subscription just to unlock your bike's true horsepower, or the stiffness of your electronic suspension, or even the cornering algorithms of your ABS.
That is wow.
We are already seeing the groundwork for a future where you don't actually own your machine's performance, you just rent it from the software.
Oh, man, paying like $19.99 a month for the 200 horsepower map, or your bike automatically governs itself to 100 horsepower if your credit card declines. That is a terrifyingly plausible future.
It really is.
Well, to you listening, take a look at your own gear, your own tech, your own vehicles. What hidden potential is sitting right there, locked behind a digital wall, just waiting for you to find the key? Maybe it's time you stop settling for just the front hallway and finally unlock the rest of the mansion. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you in the next one.